Surrey appears calm and timeless, but beneath its paths, ruins and estates lie places shaped by loss, where the past still lingers and silence is never truly empty. The Inn on the Green, standing beside the ancient Roman road of Stane Street. The Inn on the Green appears to be a quiet country pub, surrounded by open fields and woodland. To passing travelers, it offers rest and familiarity. Yet local legend suggests the land it stands on has witnessed sudden death, and that one spirit has never left. The most frequently reported apparition is that of a woman believed to have died during a fox hunt. According to accounts, she was thrown violently from her horse and sustained severe internal injuries. Though the exact circumstances of her death remain unclear, witnesses believe her spirit continues to wander near the inn. She is described as a short woman with dark hair, wearing a long, voluminous skirt, typical of a bygone era. Her appearance is often brief and silent. Some witnesses have seen her standing near the roadside or the edge of the grounds, while others describe catching only a glimpse of her movement before she fades away. Animals appear particularly sensitive to her presence. The landlord's dog has reportedly reacted with fear and agitation, barking or refusing to enter certain areas without visible cause. Paranormal researchers often note such reactions as potential indicators of unseen disturbances. Guests and staff have also reported unexplained sensations inside the building. Sudden cold spots form, without warning, particularly near entrances and doorways. Some individuals describe an oppressive feeling of unease, as though being watched even when the pub is otherwise empty. Unlike more aggressive hauntings, the activity at the Inn on the Green is subtle. There are no reports of violent poltergeist behavior or audible voices. Instead, the haunting manifests through presence, a quiet reminder of an abrupt and traumatic end. The inn's location along an ancient route may also contribute to its reputation. Stane Street has been used continuously for centuries, carrying soldiers, merchants, and travelers. Some believe such long-term human movement leaves behind residual energy capable of sustaining hauntings. Skeptics suggest that rural isolation and expectation can influence perception. Yet many experiences have been reported by individuals with no prior knowledge of the legend. Today, the Inn on the Green remains a welcoming place for locals and travelers alike. But as evening falls and the road grows quiet, some believe the fields remember a fatal fall and a rider who never truly left the hunt behind. Here, the past does not gallop loudly, it waits just beyond the edge of sight. Farnham Castle, overlooking the town from its elevated position, Farnham Castle has stood for centuries as a symbol of power, religion, and authority. Originally built in the 12th century as a residence for the bishops of Winchester, the castle has witnessed political intrigue, religious conflict, and personal tragedy, all of which many believe have left lasting marks on the site. One of the most frequently reported apparitions is a white lady. She is described as pale and softly glowing, often seen moving through corridors or standing quietly in doorways. Her presence is calm but unsettling, appearing briefly before fading without sound. Some believe she may be connected to the castle's medieval past, though her identity remains unknown. Another recurring figure is that of a knight in full armor, reportedly seen within the keep. Witnesses describe the sound of heavy footsteps and the faint clank of metal before the figure appears momentarily and vanishes. The apparition is usually silent and motionless, as though guarding a space long after its purpose has been forgotten. Perhaps the most haunting sighting involves a young girl seen dancing on one of the staircases. She is described as joyful and carefree, spinning lightly as if replaying a moment from her life. Paranormal researchers suggest this may represent a residual haunting, a final unconscious echo of a life cut short. Bishop Morley, who resided at the castle following the English Civil War, is another spirit believed to remain. His footsteps have been heard in the Fox Tower during the early hours, often accompanied by the ringing of a bell. No physical source for the bell has ever been identified. Monks have also been seen throughout the castle and its grounds, particularly in the Great Hall. These figures appear hooded and solemn, moving slowly before dissolving into the stone walls. One of the more unusual reports involves a shapeless apparition that appears to climb walls, defying gravity before disappearing entirely. Paranormal investigators believe Farnham Castle hosts multiple layered hauntings, some intelligent, others residual, shaped by centuries of occupation and authority. The diversity of sightings supports this theory. Skeptics argue that expectation and imagination influence perception in historic sites. Yet many experiences have been reported by individuals unaware of the castle's reputation. Farnham Castle now serves peaceful purposes, but when night settles and the halls fall silent, many believe the past resumes its watch. Here history does not fade. It walks armored, hooded, and sometimes dancing through the stone it once ruled. The Three Pigeons. Located on the busy High Street in Guildford, the Three Pigeons is a public house with a reputation that extends far beyond local folklore. Unlike many haunted pubs associated with vague sightings or fleeting shadows, this building has been linked to repeated and well-documented outbreaks of poltergeist activity, aggressive, disruptive, and impossible to ignore. The first major outbreak was recorded in 1976. Staff reported lights turning on and off repeatedly between 4 and 6 p.m. without any fault found in the electrical system. During the same period, the pub's cat began behaving strangely, refusing to climb the stairs to the second floor and hissing at the empty space above. As evening approached, the disturbances intensified. At approximately 1 a.m., a light fitting on the staircase was seen swinging violently as though struck or pushed before gradually slowing and coming to rest on its own. No drafts or vibrations could explain the movement. Further outbreaks followed in later years. Glasses began to move across surfaces without being touched. Furniture shifted position overnight. On one occasion, a bar stool was hurled through the air with enough force to alarm those present. Perhaps most disturbing was an incident in which a bowl of cheese sitting on the bar counter suddenly exploded, scattering fragments across the room. Electrical interference became a recurring theme. In the late 1990s, the pub experienced repeated power failures during the same late afternoon time window. The kitchen electrics would shut down without warning, only to resume minutes later. On one occasion, the landlord went to the cellar to turn on the beer barrels. When he returned to the bar moments later, every barrel had been switched off again. Witnesses described the atmosphere during these events as tense and oppressive, with the feeling that the activity was deliberate rather than random. Paranormal investigators suggest the presence of an intelligent poltergeist, an entity capable of interacting with the physical environment. Skeptics argue that old wiring and structural issues could explain some events. However, the timing, repetition, and physical force involved challenge conventional explanations. Today, the Three Pigeons continues to operate as a normal pub, but those familiar with its history remain cautious. Here, the haunting does not whisper. It throws slams and demands to be noticed. West Horsley Place. Set back from the Epsom Road behind ancient trees and quiet lawns, West Horsley Place is an elegant manor house with a long and complex history. Though outwardly peaceful, the house is closely associated with one of Surrey's most unsettling ghost legends, a woman bound not only by grief but by defiance. The apparition most frequently reported here is believed to be Elizabeth Raleigh, the wife of Sir Walter Raleigh's half-brother. Following her husband's execution for treason in the early 17th century, Elizabeth refused to allow his head to be buried with the rest of his body. Instead, she had it embalmed and carried it with her in a specially made bag for the remainder of her life. This macabre act of devotion is said to have tied her spirit permanently to West Horsley Place. Witnesses describe seeing a woman in a long, flowing gown standing in the entrance hall or moving slowly through doorways. She is often carrying a large bag clutched close to her body. The figure is silent and composed, her presence calm, but deeply unsettling once her identity is understood. Sightings are usually brief. The figure appears without warning and vanishes just as quietly, leaving behind a heavy stillness. Those who encounter her often report a sudden feeling of sorrow rather than fear, as though they have intruded upon an intensely private moment. Staff and visitors have also described cold spots forming in the entrance areas and along corridors, particularly during quiet periods when the house is empty. Some report the sensation of being watched, especially near staircases and thresholds, as though the spirit is observing movement within her former home. Paranormal researchers suggest the haunting at West Horsley Place may be an intelligent haunting driven by emotional attachment rather than unresolved trauma alone. Elizabeth Raleigh's refusal to part with her husband's remains is seen as an act of control over death itself, a bond not easily broken. Skeptics argue that the story's dramatic nature encourages suggestion. Yet sightings have been reported by individuals unaware of the legend prior to their experiences. West Horsley Place stands today as a preserved historic site admired for its architecture and calm surroundings. But within its walls, many believe a woman still walks, carrying grief made tangible. Here love did not end with death. It was sealed, and it still moves through the house. Pipbrook House, standing prominently on Reigate Road, Pipbrook House is a striking Gothic revival building that now serves as council offices for the Mole Valley district. With its pointed arches, stone detailing, and imposing presence, the building already feels watchful. Yet long before it became a center of local administration, it was known as a private residence, and it is from this period that its ghost stories are believed to originate. The most frequently reported apparition is that of a woman dressed in a long green or grey gown. She has been seen walking calmly along corridors and staircases, often late in the evening when the building is quiet. Witnesses describe her as composed and purposeful, moving as though she still has duties to attend to. Some believe she may have been a former tenant or resident of the house. Equally well known is the apparition of a butler. He is said to stand at the window of what was once the library, gazing outward as if watching over the grounds. His figure is described as solid and traditional in appearance, reinforcing the impression of a servant continuing his role long after death. Poltergeist activity has also been reported at Pipbrook House over the years. Staff members have spoken of knives being thrown down staircases without warning, striking steps with enough force to cause alarm. Books have been seen moving by themselves in the library, sliding or falling when no one is near. One of the more unusual reports involves pens and pencils mysteriously gathering themselves into neat piles in the middle of rooms. Items left scattered on desks have later been found arranged with deliberate precision, suggesting an intelligence rather than random disturbance. Workers staying late often describe a sudden heaviness in the air, accompanied by cold spots that form in specific areas of the building. Some report hearing footsteps behind them, only to find the corridor empty when they turn. Paranormal investigators suggest Pipbrook House may host an intelligent haunting, where former residents or servants remain aware of their surroundings and routines. The organized nature of the activity supports this theory. Skeptics point to old buildings' drafts and human error. Yet the consistency and physicality of reports challenge simple explanations. Today, Pipbrook House functions as a place of paperwork and public service. But when the offices fall silent and lights dim, some believe the building reverts to an earlier time. Here authority did not fade with history. It stayed, walking the halls, watching from the windows, and arranging the room as it once did. Polesden, Lacy, nestled within rolling countryside near Great Bookham Polesden, Lacy is a grand Edwardian house surrounded by landscaped gardens, woodland paths, and sweeping views across Surrey. By daylight it appears serene and carefully maintained. But as evening approaches, many visitors and staff believe the grounds take on a very different character. One of the most frequently reported apparitions is a monk-like figure dressed in a brown cloak. He has been seen standing silently on a wooden bridge within the grounds, his face obscured by his hood. Witnesses describe him as motionless and solid, vanishing only when approached too closely. His presence is often accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature. Another area associated with strange phenomena is the Nun's Walk, a secluded path running through the grounds. Visitors have reported sudden, powerful gusts of wind along this route despite calm weather elsewhere on the estate. These gusts are often accompanied by an eerie whistling sound that appears to move with the wind rather than coming from a fixed direction. Some reports describe a grey mist racing along the path at ground level, moving far faster than natural fog should. The mist is said to appear suddenly and dissipate just as quickly, leaving behind an unnatural silence. Those who witness it often report a feeling of unease or disorientation. Staff members working in the gardens during early mornings or late afternoons have described the sensation of being watched from the tree line. Footsteps have been heard following gardeners along gravel paths, stopping when the witness stops. No one is ever found. Unlike many haunted houses, the activity at Polesden Lacy is concentrated outdoors rather than inside the building. Paranormal researchers suggest this indicates a land-based haunting where events tied to religious activity, isolation, or burial grounds have imprinted themselves on the landscape rather than the structure. Skeptics argue that open countryside amplifies sound and wind patterns, especially in wooded areas. Yet the consistency of reports, particularly those involving the cloaked figure and the Nun's Walk, has persisted for decades. Polesden Lacy remains a place of beauty, heritage, and tranquility. But when the paths empty and the gardens fall still, some believe the land remembers an older presence. Here, the haunting does not dwell behind walls. It moves with the wind, and sometimes it walks beside you unseen. Gostrey Meadow, situated beside the River Wey in the historic town of Farnham, Gostrey Meadow is a small public park known for its open lawns, trees, and quiet paths. During the day, it is a place of leisure and calm. Yet after dusk, the meadow has earned a reputation as one of Surrey's most unsettling open-air hauntings, not because of violence, but because of what appears, walks, and then simply disappears. The most commonly reported apparition is a man dressed in a long black overcoat and a traditional bowler hat. Witnesses describe him as tall and well-dressed, walking calmly along the paths as though taking an evening stroll. His appearance is often described as solid and detailed, giving the impression of a living person rather than a ghost. What makes the encounter disturbing is what happens next. As witnesses watch, the man suddenly vanishes, not fading slowly, but disappearing completely in an instant. No sound, no movement, and no trace is left behind. A second figure has also been reported in the meadow. This time, witnesses describe a man, running rather than walking. He is seen moving quickly across the grass or along the paths only to vanish mid-stride. The speed and urgency of his movement contrast sharply with the stillness of the park. Those who encounter these figures often report a sudden sense of confusion or disorientation. Some describe the air becoming unnaturally quiet, as though surrounding sounds are briefly muted. Others experience a cold sensation or the feeling of being observed from behind. Unlike many haunted locations, Gostrey Meadow has no confirmed stories of murder, execution, or burial linked directly to the site. Paranormal researchers suggest the hauntings may be residual apparitions, echoes of past individuals replaying fragments of movement without awareness of modern surroundings. Another theory suggests the meadow's proximity to historic routes and waterways may play a role. Farnham has long been a crossing point for travellers, soldiers, and workers, and repeated human movement over centuries may have left behind traces capable of manifesting visually. Skeptics argue that low light fatigue and peripheral vision can create convincing illusions in open spaces. Yet reports have been made by multiple witnesses, often in clear conditions and without prior knowledge of the stories. Gostrey Meadow remains a pleasant place to walk by day, but when the light fades and the paths empty, some believe the park becomes something else entirely. Here, the haunting does not hide in buildings. It walks openly, and when you notice it, it is already gone. Reigate Castle. Standing above the town of Reigate, the ruins of Reigate Castle are easy to overlook. Much of the original structure was dismantled centuries ago, leaving behind fragments of stone earthworks and a gateway built in the 18th century. Yet despite its ruined state, the site has become associated with a quiet but persistent haunting. Reigate Castle was originally constructed shortly after the Norman conquest and served as a stronghold of authority and control. Over time, it fell into disrepair and was gradually taken apart, its stones reused elsewhere. What remains today is a place shaped as much by absence as by history. The most frequently reported apparition is an indistinct grey figure seen near the old gateway. Witnesses describe it as human in outline, but lacking detail, as though partially formed. The figure is usually stationary, standing close to the entrance before fading away when observed directly. Encounters are often accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature and an unnatural stillness. Traffic noise and surrounding sounds appear to dull briefly, creating a sense of isolation, even in daylight. Some witnesses report a feeling of pressure or unease when standing near the gateway, as though the space is charged. There are no widely known tales of specific individuals tied to the apparition. Paranormal researchers suggest the haunting may be residual, an echo of those who once guarded or passed through the castle during its centuries of use. The lack of movement or interaction supports this theory. Others believe the figure may represent a symbolic presence, a reminder of authority and confinement that once defined the site. Reigate Castle was associated with imprisonment and governance, and such functions often leave lasting impressions in folklore. Skeptics argue that light conditions and expectation influence perception, especially around ruins where the mind fills in missing detail. Yet reports of the grey figure have continued across generations, shared quietly rather than sensationally. Reigate Castle today is a place of history and open space often visited casually by locals. But those who linger near the gateway after dark sometimes report an unshakable feeling that they are not alone. Here, the haunting does not announce itself. It stands where the castle once stood, waiting as though guarding something that no longer exists. St. Catherine's Chapel. Perched on a quiet hill overlooking the River Wey near Artington, The ruins of St. Catherine's Chapel are visible from afar. Built in the early 14th century, the chapel once served pilgrims travelling between Winchester and Canterbury. Today, only stone walls remain exposed to wind weather and a reputation shaped by whispered voices and spectral sightings. The most commonly reported apparition at St. Catherine's Chapel is a grey lady. Witnesses describe her emerging slowly from the ruins, her form pale and indistinct against the stone. She is often seen near twilight standing silently before fading into the surrounding landscape. Her presence is calm, yet deeply unsettling, as though the chapel itself is momentarily occupied again. In addition to visual sightings, chanting has been reported drifting across the hillside, particularly during quiet evenings. The sound is described as low and rhythmic, resembling religious prayer rather than speech. It appears to come from no fixed direction, sometimes seeming to circle the ruins before disappearing entirely. Skeptics have suggested that the chanting may originate from Langton Priory, located some distance away, carried by the wind under certain conditions. However, witnesses argue that the sound often occurs when weather conditions make such explanations unlikely, and that its closeness feels immediate rather than distant. Those who visit the chapel at dusk frequently report a sudden drop in temperature within the ruins, even when the surrounding area remains warm. The air is often described as heavy, and visitors note an unusual silence as though natural sounds briefly recede. Paranormal researchers classify St. Catherine's Chapel as a place of residual spiritual imprint. Centuries of prayer devotion and pilgrimage may have left behind emotional echoes capable of manifesting as sound and form. The Grey Lady is often interpreted as a symbolic presence rather than a specific historical individual. Others believe the haunting reflects the chapel's abandonment. Once a place of shelter and ritual, it now stands exposed and forgotten, conditions often associated with lingering folklore. Skeptics argue that ruins naturally encourage imagination, particularly at sunset. Yet many experiences are reported by visitors unfamiliar with the site's reputation. St. Catherine's Chapel is now a place of reflection and views across the valley. But when the light fades and the hill grows quiet, some believe the ruins remember their purpose. Here prayer did not vanish with the roof. It stayed drifting across stone and sky long after the last pilgrim left. Church of St. Barnabas. Hidden among woodland on Ranmore Common, the Church of St. Barnabas sits in quiet isolation, far from busy roads and towns. Built in the 19th century, the church was intended as a place of worship for nearby villages and estates. Today, it is better known for the eerie figure said to walk the path that connects the church to the road below. The apparition most often reported here is that of an elderly man dressed in tweed. Witnesses describe him wearing traditional country clothing, a jacket, trousers, and sometimes a flat cap, walking slowly and deliberately along the path leading away from the church. His appearance is solid and detailed, giving the strong impression of a living person. What makes the encounters unsettling is his behavior. The man does not acknowledge greetings or react to the presence of others. When witnesses look away briefly and then back again, he has vanished completely, leaving the path empty and silent. Sightings usually occur during misty weather or in the fading light of late afternoon and early evening. The surrounding woodland often becomes unusually quiet during these moments, with birdsong and wind dropping away as though muted. No definitive identity has been established for the figure. Some believe he may be a former parishioner, church warden, or local landowner who once walked the route regularly. Others suggest the apparition represents a residual haunting, a repeated fragment of routine preserved in the landscape rather than a conscious spirit. Visitors have also reported an unexplained sense of calm mixed with unease near the church grounds. Unlike more aggressive hauntings, there are no reports of voices, physical contact, or poltergeist activity. The presence is subtle, fleeting, and deeply personal to those who encounter it. Paranormal researchers often classify such hauntings as pathway apparitions commonly associated with long-used walking routes where repetitive human movement may leave an imprint over time. Skeptics argue that low visibility and expectation can easily create convincing illusions in rural environments. Yet the consistency of the description, the clothing posture, and silence of the figure remains notable. The Church of St. Barnabas continues to stand quietly among the trees, its path worn by centuries of footsteps. But some believe one walker never truly left. As the final location in this journey through Surrey's most haunted places, it offers no screams, no violence, no spectacle. Only a man on a path, walking and then gone. Every place we visited holds more than history, it holds memory. Which location unsettled you the most? Share your thoughts below. This is Creepy Experience, where we explore haunted places shaped by the past and the silence they left behind.